both sides remain on high alert. Russian President Vladimir Putin announces a 3-day ceasefire for the May holiday, but Zelensky calls it manipulation and demands a full Russian withdrawal. France plans to increase pressure on Moscow as South Korea condemns North Korean troops in Ukraine. Well, there's been a remarkable turnaround in Canada's elections as Mark Carney and the Liberal Party secure a surprising victory. In his victory speech, Carney slammed President Trump, declaring Trump is trying to break us. But that will never happen. Carney, now Canada's Prime Minister, also warned that the old relationship with the United States is over and pledged to build an independent future for Canada. Let's listen in to what Carney's had to say. But the race well, in the latest federal election results in Canada, the Liberal Party, led by Mark Carney, emerged victorious. They secured 168 out of the 303 seats. The Conservative Party followed closely, winning 144 seats. NATO Secretary-General Mark Rutte expressed his eagerness to strengthen the alliance with Canada under Prime Minister Carney's leadership. Meanwhile, French President Emmanuel Macron congratulated Carney, highlighting his embodiment of a strong Canada. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky also extended his congratulations, expressing hope for deeper ties between Canada and Ukraine. Additionally, India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi congratulated Carney, suggesting the potential for a fresh chapter in Canada-India relations. Meanwhile, Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese praised his Commonwealth partner, saying, "In these times of global uncertainty, I look forward to continuing our work together to strengthen the enduring friendship between us." Well, joining us to discuss all of the developments from this Canada election, this historic Canada election. First is Gautam Mukherjee, a senior journalist joining us from New Delhi. Gautam, thank you ever so much for being here with us. This is a comeback from the Liberal parties that, although polls predicted just months ago, seemed extremely unlikely. How did Mark Carney turn it around? Well, instead we are joined by Ross Feingold. I will pitch the same question to you, Ross. What was it that gave Mark Carney the impetus to turn this election result around?
Most analysts and observers feel it was a reaction to Donald Trump and Donald Trump's frequent statements about taking over Canada or Canada becoming the 51st state of the United States. President Trump, while Justin Trudeau was still the prime minister, frequently referred to him as governor on social media. So it seems that the Canadian electorate, by a small margin, not a very large margin, but by a small margin in the national vote, which is a different figure from the number of seats that each party wins. But it seems that on the national vote level, people wanted the experienced policy making with Prime Minister Carney, given his experience at the Bank of Canada and the Bank of England. So they wanted somebody with real policy background who could deal with international negotiations and also probably hurt himself given the tensions between Trump and Canada, because earlier in the camp he came across as a bit similar to Trump. He talked about woke ideology. He talked about defunding public broadcasters because they were. So some of his statements came across as too Trumpy, and it was enough to hurt him with the vote a few hours ago.
Yes, Ross, of course, there's not just the Liberal Party in this election, but the front runner alongside them were the Conservatives. Pierre not just lost the election, but looks set to lose his sequence of this development.
The big question at the moment is whether he's going to seek to remain as Conservative Party leader, and if so, does he plan to lead the party into the next election years from now? It's usual for a party leader to remain as the party leader, but from his remarks, he made his remarks last night not knowing what the result of his own seat would be. But we now have that result, and it will be very interesting to watch in the coming hours and the coming weeks whether he can continue to be party leader or there's going to be challengers. Normally speaking, you would expect the party leader to be somebody who has a seat in Parliament.
Yes, Ross, and looking now forwards, of course, we know that Mark Carney will be the Prime Minister of Canada for the coming years. Of course, tensions with the United States reigning strong during this election campaign. How do you think Carney's stance during campaigning will impact relations with the US moving forward?
They're going to have to enter into negotiations, just like other major trading partners or even smaller trading partners of the United States are trying to enter in negotiations to stave off those reciprocal tariffs that President Trump has threatened to impose. So the two leaders are going to have to talk, President Trump and Prime Minister Carney. They're going to have to meet. Meetings between the U.S. President and the Prime Minister of Canada are fairly routine and usually happen several times a year. And they're going to have to negotiate. And President Trump will have to accept the reality that this man is the Prime Minister of Canada. And Carney's going to have to accept the reality that Trump is a tough negotiator on behalf of the United States. And they're going to have to take it from there. I would expect, just as with other major trading partners, that there is a deal to be reached.
Yes, Ross, very end our discussion. We have, of course, outline of support from other world leaders. Of course, Canada's position sitting in discussions on the Russia-Ukraine war, also negotiations with China and tensions with China over trade separate to those tariff trade tensions with Donald Trump. How important is it that Carney tackles the geopolitical situation and uncertainty head on?
That's a really interesting question, because I think coming out of the Republican Canada tackle domestic issues, and they have in Canada what is usually called an affordability crisis. The cost of housing, the cost of daily necessities has gone up tremendously. Too much immigration in recent years into Canada, and it's time to slow that pace down. So I think are really looking at him to tax. He will as well.
Ask you for joining. We do news, and an explosion has rocked an injuring blast that has now been brought under control, according to local authorities. The facility was operated by an Iranian company, provision of the country's National Security Council. The site was reportedly involved in the production of explosives and other chemical material. This marks the second deadly blast in Iran in just a month. Over the weekend, a separate explosion at a southern port has left at least 70 people dead and more than 1,000 injured. Moving on now, and a high-level security meeting is underway in India's Ministry of Home Affairs in New Delhi following heightened tensions in Jammu and Kashmir. India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi is leading the discussions, joined by chiefs of the different security forces. The meeting comes just days after Pakistan's Defence Minister Khawaja Asif openly admitted to his country's role in supporting terrorism. A statement India has condemned, calling Pakistan a rogue state fueling global instability. At the United Nations, India's Deputy Permanent Representative Yojna Patel delivered a sharp rebuttal to Pakistan during a terrorism victims event. This follows Islamabad's reference to the recent Pahalgam terror attack. On the ground, nearly 50 parks and gardens across vulnerable areas in Kashmir have now been shut as a precaution. Security officials say the closures are part of ongoing reviews, with more tourist locations potentially being added in the coming days. Meanwhile, China has reacted to the increased tensions. Let's listen in to what their foreign ministry have said.
印度和巴基斯坦都是南亚地区的重要国家，两国的和睦相处对于地区的和平、稳定与发展至关重要。作为印度和巴基斯坦的共同邻国，中方呼吁双方保持克制，通过对话协商妥善处理分歧，共同维护地区的和平与。
Well, joining us to discuss the latest developments in the ongoing tensions between India and Pakistan following the devastating terror attack in Pahalgam is retired Major General Ajit Doval, a global strategic defence expert. Thank you very much for being here with us, Major General. I want to look first at this meeting that Modi is chairing with security officials and heads. What's the significance of this meeting and what can we expect to come from it?
Well, Joshua, thank you very much for having me on your show. Well, this meeting is very important because it is just about a week that we had the dastardly act at Pahalgam, and thereon the things have moved at a very rapid pace. India has taken a couple of steps on the diplomatic front, which is keeping the Treaty of Indus Water on suspension, and also certain diplomatic actions like cancellation of visas, closing of the checkpost at the Tari border. So these are the steps that have been taken on diplomatic front. And now comes kinetic steps that India would be taking. And that's what is now being discussed as to how India must respond militarily. And there are a number of options. And these have to be thought through. It is not this time one action or two action like what has happened before, because that has not made Pakistan bend its ways. So now it's going to be a long drawn, and possibly Pakistan army has to be brought into the ring. And therefore such meetings are very critical, because it's here that government is going to convey its political intent to the leaders in the uniform and also to others, and how they are going to actually execute that political intent on the ground by the various security forces. So therefore this meeting is very important. It takes into consideration all the parameters. It takes into consideration how to optimize on the total national power to teach Pakistan a very hard lesson, and also what is going on in the international arena, how China has reacted to help out his own, lifelong, all-weather friend Pakistan, which is almost like a rental state. How other countries are reacting, like Turkey, sending very express type of, potential combat potential aid to Pakistan. So all these will be under consideration, and this will be the meetings where the government takes very considered, calibrated steps to move on further.
Yes.
Sure.
Major General Doval, of course, the tensions are rising, and while we're looking, of course, at a horrific terror attack and the reaction to that, of course, global leaders voicing concern over security and geopolitical stability. How important is it that any meeting that is had over a response to this catastrophic loss of life considers the potential of warfare and the ramifications that could also have on the region?
Definitely, because as I said now, that India would be taking certain kinetic steps, certain military actions, and these will have ramification, because after all, nothing can be seen in isolation. When India and Pakistan have had very tenuous relations, basically because Pakistan believes in terrorism, it believes in violence of global terrorism. So therefore, I think world polity is quite aware of it. But the point is that India would be taking very calibrated, very considered steps, because main aim now would be to defeat the proxy war, and in that there are a number of options on the table. But I quite agree that this will have ramification at least in the close region. As it is, couple of steps are already having impact, like Pakistan has closed airspace, that is having an impact. There's no trade between India and Pakistan, and the Pakistan national have been sent back. Now all these are only diplomatic. But when it comes to the military option, I'm sure lot more will follow, and definitely these will not be restricted to the two countries. It will have an impact, and the allies like China, Turkey, they would also be playing their role. So I think we need to see this in a both bilateral, regional, and also in the global perspective, because after all, Pakistan is not going to get away with what it has been doing for last 3.5 decades. I think Indian government will now ensure that it mends its ways, otherwise it pays the price for its terrorist activities and violent and hostile action against India.
Major General Doval, to bring an end to our discussion, of course, we're talking about diplomacy, tensions, but the human aspect of this is still there. Of course, the families and everyone who knew the 26 people who were massacred in this terrorist attack are still grieving, as is the country of India, but also now the announcement that sections of Jammu and Kashmir's tourist industry is being shut. How devastating will this be for the communities that are currently grieving and dealing with that severe loss of life that was seen a week ago?
Joshua, the way the terrorists have acted against humanity, I think the affected families will always remain. They will not be able to get over it, no matter how much feelings we try to assuage, because they have suffered a deep loss of the near dear ones. Now, coming to the impact on tourist industry, Kashmir Valley, Jammu and Kashmir, largely depend upon tourism. It's almost 20% of the GDP comes from tourism. And this is going to be hugely impacted. And who is going to feel the impact? Is the common person, common man, the common person who are actually involved in this whole industry at the grassroots level, like the pony riders, taxi drivers, guides, hotels, restaurants, everything is going to be impacted. And that exactly was the aim of the terrorists and the handlers in Pakistan, because they could not digest that Jammu and Kashmir is moving to a normalcy. The tourist turnout was the record. They had a very successful election in which people participated in great numbers. Now all this was not palatable to Pakistan and the handlers. So therefore, one of the key aim of this terrorist strike was to derail the normalcy that is coming in, derail the process of tourism, and also strike at the very, I would say, employment and economy of Kashmir Valley. I think common man ultimately is going to pay the price, Yeshua.
Retired Major General Gigi Doval, thank you ever so much for joining us. We will, of course, here on NewsX World continue to bring you all the developments following the devastating terror attack in Pahalgam and the growing tensions. We head now to Europe, and Russian President Vladimir Putin has ordered a 3-day ceasefire in Ukraine for the month of May to coincide with Moscow's Victory Day celebrations. The Kremlin says all combat operations will pause from May the 8th to May the 10th for humanitarian reasons and to mark the 80th anniversary of the end of World War II. But Ukraine has responded. President Volodymyr Zelensky has criticised the proposal as another attempt at manipulation. He says if Russia truly wants peace, it must stop fighting immediately and not wait for a parade. Ukraine continues to demand a full unconditional ceasefire lasting at least 30 days. Let's listen to what Volodymyr Zelensky has said.
Ми ще 11 березня відповіли позитивно на саме американську пропозицію повної тиші. Ми запропонували своє у двосторонньому порядку Росії припинити удари щонайменше по цивільних об'єктах, хоча б по них. Запропонували також зробити повним і продовжувати на 30 днів припинення вогню на Великдень. Росія постійно все це відкидає і маніпулює світом, намагається обманути Сполучені Штати. Зараз от знов чергова спроба маніпуляцій. Чомусь всі повинні чекати 8 травня і тільки тоді припиняти вогонь, щоб забезпечити Путіну тишу на час параду. Ми цінуємо життя людей, а не паради.
Well, the truce announcement comes as US Secretary of State Marco Rubio holds crucial talks with Foreign Minister of Russia Sergei Lavrov. Washington says this week could decide the future of its peace efforts. Meanwhile, Russia claims it has shot down 91 Ukrainian drones overnight. 40 of them were intercepted over the Kursk region near the border. Meanwhile, in Ukraine, a 12-year-old girl died in a reported Russian drone strike in the Dnipropetrovsk region. Her family was also reportedly injured. Officials say another child was pulled alive from the rubble. The drone attack comes despite Russia's claims of seeking a humanitarian pause. Well, joining us to discuss these developments is Ruslan Bortnik, Director of the Ukrainian Institute of Politics, joining us from Kyiv. Ruslan, thank you very much for being here. Zelensky's response to Putin's three-day ceasefire proposal has been clear, looking for at least a 30-day ceasefire. Why has he chosen this path as opposed to accepting the three-day ceasefire and then looking towards further peace?
Thank you for the invitation, colleagues. Ukraine estimates these Russian proposals like a game, like a play, during which Russia is seeking for a safe environment during the victory march in May 9th. When a lot of international leaders, presidents will come to Russian capital to take part in these celebrities and so on. And for Ukrainian side, it's like a game. They are trying to avoid any responsibilities about some problems which could happen during this march, this celebrity march. And moreover, Ukraine insisting on unconditional and without the time ceasefire, because Ukraine is trying to decline all Russian previous ultimatums to achieve this ceasefire. I want to remind you that Russia demanded to lifting the sanctions from Russian agricultural sector, from Russian fleet, and so on and so on. There are a lot of demands which Russia stated like a condition for a ceasefire, for unconditional, for a long-term ceasefire. And Ukraine is insisting for this unconditional ceasefire, is trying to decline these Russian demands and trying to avoid the previous preliminary concessions from Ukraine and from the West before the direct negotiation talk.
Yes, Ruslan, of course the US have spoken previously about potentially pulling out of these peace negotiations if progress isn't made. It seems that Russia is pushing forward with some progress, but Marco Rubio continuing to voice concern with both sides remaining strong on their non-negotiables. What do you think is really needed at this point in order for a ceasefire deal, a full ceasefire deal, to be agreed in the short term?
Well, it's a very good question. I think the United States administration is hurry up because of this symbolic date, 100 days of Trump's administration, which will celebrate in the beginning of May, in a few days. So they are willing to achieve some significant results till that day to present these results on the Ukrainian-Russian ceasefire, for example, to the public, and they are hiring. So I think this dangers from United States side to leave the negotiation process or to make additional sanctions for Russia or to make sanctions against Ukraine or to left Ukraine without the military aid. This is a tools of influence on the sides to achieve these results. Well, you know, we have a lot of talks now, but and I hear a lot of disappointed voices which are saying there is no significant progress, but it's not so. Because even 6 months ago, we were not able to talk about the direct topics of the future balance between Ukraine and Russia and so on. Now we are in trade stage and we are talking about very concrete, very significant, very practical things. We are in trade stage now. And of course, this stage is very emotional. It's very bright. Sometimes sides are trying to show that they are not interested more to continue this negotiation. They're leaving the room, they're backing back after some time. So I think we need to be very careful, very calm in this situation and check the political moves only by the hands to see what they are doing, not what they are talking. Because we have a lot of disinformation and manipulation, trade manipulation, just now in this moment. Of course, there are still a lot of unresolved questions. We are talking about the security guarantees, about territorial issues, about the money, but sides now are in very tough and very bright and very deep trade negotiation process, and this is a very significant changes during the previous year.
Ruslan Bortnik, unfortunately we are out of time, but thank you ever so much for joining us and providing your perspective there. We will of course be across all of the developments in the ongoing war between Russia and Ukraine, but that is all that we have time for. We will continue to bring you that and more of the latest breaking news from across the world.